Every football fan has that one moment, that miss, the claps, the playoff final, the relegation that still hurts to think about to this day. For Championship fans, this league was built on heartbreak. Today, we're going to go through and relive the worst moment for every single Championship fan base. And look, I already know there's going to be lots of disagreements here. There's been lots of bad moments for these clubs. They're not in the Championship for any old reason. So if you disagree, if you agree, if you want to give any suggestions, get in the comments, debate it. You see a comment that you disagree with, get in there and debate it. That's all from me. Let's get straight into the video. Hope you enjoy, everyone. First off, we've got Birmingham City and the final day relegation in the 2010-2011 season. Now, Birmingham had just won the league earlier that year, so context is really important. They finally had, some future ahead of them. They had European football on the cards. If they could just stay up, it would have been a platform to build on. It was a huge moment, that League Cup, for them. And their Premier League fate came down to a trip to White Hart Lane, where a win would likely have kept them up as well. That's important to remember here. Only for Roman Pavlyuchenko, a player Blues had been linked with all season, went on to net 2, sending them down to the Championship. And they're yet to return since. Absolute wounder. For Blackburn Rovers, it's the appointment of Steve Kean. And in this video and my other videos, I've tried to say that I want to focus on stuff mainly on the pitch, hence why I've left the very obvious choice of the Venkies out and went with a football manager hiring instead. So Blackburn fans, don't kill me, I know it's them. Just wanted to get that in there. Following the sacking of Big Sam, Kean was initially the caretaker before being made a permanent manager in December 2010, and that's where it all went to rats. Keane's agent was already on the advisor board to the Venky family, so it's a little bit dodgy if you ask me. But flash forward into the spring and Rovers were 10 games without a win and the football was just dire. It was tragic. Despite the club being bottom, the Venkies then offered Keane another new deal on improved terms, and that's when the protests really started from the fans. But the nail was already in the coffin. Blackburn were relegated and they're yet to return to the top flight 16 years later. For Bristol City, it's Dean Windass. And now, any Bristol City fans watching this will already know where this is going. It was the 2008 playoff final, 86,000 fans packed in. However, the Robins fans were the ones left devastated. Dean Windass hit a wonder volley from the edge of the box, and it was a great strike, to be fair. And you guessed it, Bristol City are still yet to play Premier League football. He must haunt Bristol City fans like a ghost, honestly. For Charlton, it's the Selhurst Park ground share. Charlton had been in money trouble for a number of years, and a winding up order had been issued and then called off. And just 25 minutes before the Football League deadline, the rent for their long-term home was proving difficult to afford. The East Terrace was closed for health and safety reasons, while the West Stand was subject of legal claims and counterclaims, and in effect the Valley was no longer usable as a stadium for a football club. So a solution was required. Then, just hours before welcoming Crystal Palace to the Valley, the announcement came that Charlton would indeed be heading to Selhurst Park. In hindsight, it's funny because both sets of fans are on record saying they absolutely despised it as they loathe each other. But yeah, the ultimate humiliation for Charlton, really. A really tough moment for their fans, and I haven't looked at the numbers based on attendance, but it wouldn't surprise me if their attendance went down. For Coventry City, I've gone with getting relegated at Villa Park. And look, I'm a Villa fan. Coventry fans, I come in peace, I promise. I'm too young to have really experienced our club's rivalry to its full extent, but it goes without saying that Villa and Coventry do not like one another. If I was to ring up my old man now, he'd put Coventry below Birmingham probably as the teams he hates the most. Anyway, I digress. That sets the context. But this is obviously a massively painful moment for any Cov fans that can remember. The Sky Blues had spent 34 years in the top flight. And yes, they'd had a few close run-ins with relegation, sure. But life outside the top flight was unknown to an entire generation, really. It was made even more painful by the fact they went 2-0 up on the day, before Villa launched a second-half comeback to win 3-2, dooming Cov, who are yet to return to the top flight. Relegated in your rival's backyard, it doesn't really get much worse, does it? It's a tough one. For Derby County, I went with the 2014 playoff final. Now look, administration's by far the most obvious answer, but if I was to choose financial and ownership woes for each club, it would not be a very entertaining list because every club has been through it at some point, especially Derby. So second, if you like, is the 2014 playoff final loss to QPR. The game was 0-0, heading into extra time. Still anybody's game at this point. 87,000 people packed into Wembley, you know the score. And Keogh clears it straight to Zamora. Zamora scores, QPR are promoted and Derby haven't returned to the Prem since. Heartbreaking stuff. I'd wager that Richard Keogh thinks about that moment a hell of a lot when he's on his own. For Hull City, I went with the FA Cup final loss. And a club like Hull getting to an FA Cup final was a huge achievement in its own right. They were obviously very proud of their team. And when goals from James Chester and Curtis Davis put them 2-0 up in 8 minutes, Hull fans started to believe it might actually be about to happen. And then the claps began when Santi Cazorla killed in a free kick, and suddenly the next goal in that game became humongous. Unfortunately for Hull, that goal was scored by Laurent Koscielny. Aaron Ramsey would win it 3-2 for the Gunners in extra time, and I'm sure Hull fans must think of what if. It's a hell of a missed opportunity, man, in this modern era, you know. For Ipswich Town, I went to the 2005 playoffs. And look, there's been many heartbreaking times for Ipswich fans in this century, especially the period between 2018 and 2022. But there's an individual moment the 2005 playoffs stick out. Ipswich had played some cracking footy that season under Joe Royle, and actually finished 12 points above West Ham in third place. The first leg at Upton Park finished 2-2, and a lot of Ipswich fans had a lot of confidence going back to Portman Road for the second leg and essentially a straight shootout. A Bobby Zamora brace would ultimately break their hearts, and look, this is not the last time you'll hear Bobby Zamora, and not the first time you'll hear Bobby Zamora mentioned in this video, because he haunts the Championship. It would take another 18 years for the Tractor Boys to return to the top flight, so yeah, stinger. For Leicester City, I've gone with the Deeney moment. And I feel like I'm doing a disclaimer for each team here, for Leicester especially. It goes without saying that the horrible tragedy of their owner dying in that helicopter crash is for many fans the ultimate worst, and may he rest in peace. In terms of on the pitch, I've gone with the Deeney moment. We've all seen it multiple times. Many of us probably think it's the best footballing moment ever. But for Foxes fans, it's still got a sting. Obviously, they've gone on to achieve loads since then. It might have been a blessing in disguise. But when Anthony Knockaert stepped up for that penalty, they must have thought they were on their way, right? I guarantee any Leicester fan did not speak a word on the train home after that game. For Middlesbrough, I've gone with the 2009 relegation from the Premier League. Now, when I quizzed Borough fans about their worst moments supporting them, they were the fan base which gave me the biggest range of different answers. I had Cov in the playoffs, the UEFA Cup final, the FA Cup final, the quarter-final against Cardiff. So I've decided to go with the 2009 relegation because it kind of ends that whole era, which, looking back on the history books, was very kind to Borough. They won their first and only major trophy, 2 years of European football and a decade of top-flight football, and some great players along the way. And that 2009 relegation was the ending of all that. And let's be honest, they've made a Prem appearance since then, but they've never really come close to getting back to that level. Some clubs just never truly recover from the drop, and that's what's happened to Borough recently. But they look very good this season, I must say. Up next, it's Millwall, and I've gone with the Blackburn capitulation game. I've admitted many times on this channel that since my Villa escaped the hellhole that is the Championship, I haven't paid nearly as much attention. But I remember this game really well because of the jeopardy that was on the line. Context is important because Millwall haven't played in the Championship playoffs since 2002, and all they had to do was win at the Den against Blackburn Rovers to confirm a playoff spot. And they lost 4-3. And it gets worse. They were 3-1 ahead in the game, absolutely cruising. Blackburn would then bag 3 in the second half to win 4-3. And it was just the ultimate capitulation from the Lions, really. An awful, awful moment for Millwall fans, and one that they will think about to this day. For Norwich City, I've gone with that Colchester game. Norwich won, Colchester 7 at Carrow Road in their first game since relegation to League One. Does it get more soul-crushing than that? I encourage any Norwich fan who truly can say that they didn't believe they were going for a years of doom after that. They must have thought they were absolutely finished for the next decade. In hindsight, it was probably the most important game of that season because it gave them a bit of a reality check to kick their season off, and they ended up going up as champions, and they've been on Premier League campaigns since then, so yeah. But bloody hell, at the time, it must have felt like despair. Like, come on. Hi guys, hope you're all enjoying this video. Just jumping in here real quick to say thanks for the support. Loving the support I've got. The views, subs, whatever. I'm on 1,200 subs at the moment. Started this channel 3 months ago, just waffling about football. You might like some of the other videos on my channel. Go check them out. But yeah, just want to reiterate how thankful I am for the support. Loads more EFL content coming, Prem content, Champions League content, you name it. So yeah, thanks everyone and hope you're enjoying. For Oxford United, it's relegation to non-league. Many Premier League snobs like myself and even the more generic football fan might look at Oxford in the Championship right now and think, they've been there for a couple of seasons, you know. They've had a smooth ride. They must be on the rise. They've always been a solid and stable club. Wrong. The 2005-06 season saw Oxford relegated to non-league football for the first time in 44 years. Need I say much more? To make matters worse, it wasn't a given going into the last day either. There were 5 teams all circling the drain. Twists, turns throughout the day. And then the ultimate realisation that they'd be following their club into non-league. Horror for any fan to imagine. And definitely their worst moment on the pitch, I think. For Portsmouth, I've gone with the Kevin Prince Boateng pen miss in the FA Cup final. And when we talk about Pompey, we're talking about one of the fan bases that's been subject to the most horrible financial difficulties we've seen. It's resulted in relegations, players being sold, administrations, you name it. However, on the pitch, a moment that will make Pompey fans gag is the Kevin Prince Boateng 2010 FA Cup miss against Chelsea. Yes, they'd won it a couple of years before, but could you imagine if they'd have won it 2 in 3 years? It would have been unbelievable to look back on. What made it 10 times worse, though, is that they were already relegated. They were in financial turmoil, no idea where their club was heading. And a win that day would have not only eased the pain and given the fans a great moment to live off, but it would also have been a great middle finger to the establishment that was on their way to doom them. A tough moment to take, and I hope to see them back in the Premier League. I do like Pompey. For Preston North End, I've gone with the 2005 playoffs. Another victim of the 2005 playoffs. Another victim to West Ham United. And another victim to that man, Bobby Zamora. It was Preston's last direct shot at the Premier League, and it wasn't taken. Zamora scored on 57 minutes, and that was all she wrote, really. Preston had another bite of the cherry in 2009, but it wasn't meant to be again. Since then, they're yet to mount another playoff campaign and remain in the Championship. They are going well this season, though, so who knows. For Queen's Park Rangers, it's Vauxhall Motors. You may drive a Vauxhall, you may know someone who drives a Vauxhall, but did you know Vauxhall Motors beat QPR in the 2002 free season? Vauxhall Motors caused one of the biggest upsets in FA Cup history when they dumped out QPR on penalties at Loftus Road. And it's important to note that Vauxhall's players were also part-timers against obviously a full-time QPR squad. The game finished 1-1 in regular time, but when QPR scored early, it looked like it was going to be a routine day at the office. And they were wrong. They were very wrong. Penalties followed, and that's when Vauxhall got the job done. Great achievement for them, by the way, but bloody hell, that's a tough day at work on Monday if you're a QPR fan. For Sheffield United, I've gone with Wembley. Yeah, it's a place, it's a stadium, it's not a moment per se. But come on, it's a multitude of moments. My God, Sheffield United hate Wembley. Their fans hate Wembley. Everything about Sheffield United hates Wembley Stadium. You only have to cast your mind back to last season's playoff final to remember when Sunderland scored that disgusting last-minute winner. I could go on. How about the 2012 playoff final when they lost to Huddersfield on pens? The 2009 playoff final versus Burnley? This starts to sound like bullying after a while. The last time the Blades won promotion or a trophy at Wembley was 1925. So yeah, not so much a worst moment, more like a worst place, but the point still stands. For Sheffield Wednesday, I've gone with the League One days between 2003 and 2005. Sheffield Wednesday are a club going through it. We all know that, and they've been going through it for some time. It's been a quarter of a century since the last time they were in the Premier League. And in 2003, they sunk even further to League One. That doesn't sound so rare nowadays because they were in League One a couple of seasons ago, but at the time, this was kind of unheard of. The quality was just dross, and Ronaldo would have struggled playing on that side. The quality of League One nowadays compared to back then is leaps and bounds. Sheffield Wednesday fans, I talked about this, remember being shell-shocked when they watched the first game of that season. They say that Messi, Ronaldo, whoever could have played in that team, and it wouldn't have made a shadow of a difference. Apparently, it was just a dreadful, dreadful time to support Wednesday. Rock bottom for a great club. For Southampton, it's the 9-0 loss to Leicester City. Southampton have had relegations, administrations, last-minute defeats and more. But losing 9-0 in your own backyard, that's got to take the trophy, hasn't it? In 2019, Leicester rocked up to St Mary's and knocked 9 goals past the Saints. It ended up being the first of 2 times in 3 years. Just a horror period for Southampton in general. It was embarrassing, demoralising, I could go on. Long walk home to the car after that game. For Stoke, I've gone with the FA Cup final loss in 2011. And when Stoke put 5 past Bolton in the semi, they must have been starting to dream. Anything can happen on the day, and Stoke were a solid outfit at the time as well. They had a chance. But it just didn't happen for them, and it still looms large. We live in an era where it's rare for a team that's not called Manchester City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool or Manchester United to win a trophy. That's what made Palace and Newcastle's wins last season so special. So when you look at Stoke now in their current situation, you know, that could be haunting them for a long, long time. For Swansea, I've gone with Fabianski leaving the club. Lots of Swansea fans said for them it was the Northampton playoff loss in the 90s, but the most requested was Fabianski's send-off when the Swans were relegated. The Pole, who was back up at Arsenal, was signed to Swansea for free following the departure of Michel Vorm and went on to play 150 games for the Swans and was pivotal in their Premier League reign. He was a great servant for them and no doubt hurts to think that he's played more games for West Ham or spent longer at West Ham than he did at the Liberty Stadium. There's nothing worse than seeing a legend leave the club, is there? It hurts everyone. For Watford, I've gone with the playoff final loss. Now, this one doesn't seem so bad because hindsight's a wonderful thing and the Hornets would eventually go up next season and have nice years in the Prem. But at the time, it was a travesty. They just had the Deeney moment against Leicester and it just felt like this was their year. Everything had fallen into place, the stars had aligned, and then come the worst 90 minutes of football you will ever see, with the game being won by a penalty by ex-Watford man Kevin Phillips. Anybody who's been to Wembley and watched their team lose knows exactly how quiet that walk down Wembley way would have been. It's just horrible. For West Brom, I've gone with the Villa penalty playoff loss. Now, we're in the back end of this video, and it's very clear to me that every team has had a nasty playoff final loss at some point. So with the Baggies, I've taken a more recent one. The playoff semi-final pens lost to Villa. I mean, is there anything more hurtful than losing on pens in the playoffs in your own backyard against your local rivals? I don't know if there is. If it was the other way around, I'd have been in hibernation for the summer. That's all I know. The first leg finished 2-1 to Villa, following goals from Dwight Gale, Tammy Abraham, and a scorcher by Conor Hourihane, before Craig Dawson levelled it all at the Hawthorns. Johnston made a cracking save to prevent a domer in extra time, but Villa were gone to win on pens. Now I'm sure that summer the name Jed Steer was not allowed in Baggies households. And for Wrexham, after a long old video, it's the Paul Mullin decline. Wrexham are a weird example because they can be split into pre and post takeover, because they've almost had two different clubs within themselves in those times. Pre-takeover, you've got the Wembley loss to North Ferriby, relegation from the Football League, the Jeff Moss and the Alex Hamilton era. Post-takeover, though, it's probably the decline of Paul Mullin due to injury and age. He'd been the striker that symbolised the new era of Wrexham and a huge reason why they've surged through the leagues. And the history books are going to look back on him extremely kindly, no doubt. When he didn't make the Championship squad, it would have been a huge kick in the stomach for any Wrexham fan around the world, especially those fans who had just started supporting them within the last 5 years or so. And that is that. Thank you for watching, guys. It took me so long to do all the research for this video, make the video, edit the video, so any subscriptions, comments, likes are all massively appreciated, so thank you for that. Get in the comments, give your opinion, debate everyone else in the comments. I want to see a bit of a community get built here, if we can. So yeah, thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the week. I don't know when this is going up, but yeah, hopefully your team wins. See you later. Have a good one.